evening and welcome to ILTV's Israel Weekly. I'm Aaron Porras, and with me today to discuss the latest diplomatic and political developments are Professor of Political Science of the Hebrew University, Professor Moshe Amirav, and founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Martin Sherman. Our top stories tonight: a White House leak puts tension between the United States and Israel. Education Minister Naftali Bennett receives ire over his new university code of ethics proposal. And to begin, a Hamas terror tunnel was recently discovered beneath a United Nations-sanctioned school in Gaza. And now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is demanding action.
אונר"א במידה רבה, בעצם קיומה, וגם לצערי בפעולתה מעת לעת, מנציחה את בעיית הפליטים הפלסטינים ולא פותרת אותה. ולכן הגיע הזמן לפרק את אונר"א ולמזג את החלקים שלה בנציבות הפליטים העליונה של האו"ם.
Netanyahu also reiterated that he made the same point with United States Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley during her trip to Jerusalem. Then, amidst Gaza's ongoing humanitarian crisis, Israel decided to put the screws to Hamas just a little bit more by agreeing with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas not to foot the power bill for Gaza. What?
אני חושב שפעם ראשונה שבתוך אוכלוסיית עזה יש מודעות לכך שהמשבר האחרון הוא לא קשור לישראל. הוא קשור למאבק בין פתח לבין חמאס, הוא קשור למאבק בין אבו מאזן ליחיא סנוואר.
Now, let's assume that UNRWA is shut down. What happens to the camps that they survey? I'm going to start with you, Dr. Sherman.
Well, first of all, let me welcome and commend Netanyahu for his position that he's now taken on UNRWA, because it's always better late than never, even if it's much later.
So you agree with it?
Oh, definitely. This is something that I've been advocating for well over a decade. I remember a good number of years ago, I gave a presentation to a subcommittee at the Knesset saying exactly what Netanyahu has said now. The whole UNRWA anomaly is a scandal. I don't know whether the viewers know, but all the refugees on the face of the globe, whether it's tsunamis or famine or political oppression, are under the auspices of an organization called the UN High Commission for Refugees, except the Palestinians. The Palestinians have a special organization just for them, with a different definition and a different mandate of how to deal with refugees. According to the High Commission definition, which is valid for all the refugees on the globe, the number of refugees goes down over time. According to the UNRWA Palestinian definition, the number of refugees balloons over time. According to the High Commission mandate, you can find permanent solutions for refugees in third-party countries, not necessarily their country of origin. According to the UNRWA mandate, you can only take care of their humanitarian needs. The result is exactly what Netanyahu said. If you combine the UNRWA definition of a refugee, which by definition creates an expanding population, and you cannot solve their problem permanently, by definition, UNRWA perpetuates the problem it's supposed to solve. And that's exactly what the Israeli government now finally seems to have grasped, and decades too late.
Do you take the same position?
Yeah, I think Netanyahu is absolutely right by his criticism on what I myself, and you know, I met with many Palestinians, including Arafat, and I told him I'm a refugee too. I had a card that I'm a refugee. But the issue is not symbolic, the issue is practical. We are speaking now, you know, when we went to Camp David, I was advising to Prime Minister Barak in Camp David, and I counted, I went to see how many real refugees from 48 exist today. So it's less than 10,000. Less than 10,000 refugees.
So by your definition, you're not counting any of the children of the original.
Of course not.
But no one does.
I'm
That's
a refugee.
the international definition. That's not a hereditary status.
Right.
So
but again,
the whole thing, no, what I'm trying to say is that absolutely we have to look at it in a different way. We have to put it in the standards of the UN for refugees, and we have to deal with it, including one of the issues we are dealing with the Palestinians if we come to peace. This is one of the issues.
So, okay, so you mentioned the High Commission for Human Rights through the United Nations.
No, High Commission for Refugees.
For refugees, I'm sorry. Thank you. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees. Are they, so you are suggesting that they absorb,
exactly what Netanyahu said.
UNRWA's,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Why should Palestinian refugees be treated differently from all the refugees on the face of the globe?
So here's kind of my follow-up, is that organizations, especially aid organizations, oftentimes will rely or integrate themselves heavily with the local populations, the local government, to aid them in their mission. So is the ineffective and corrupt scenery that we're seeing, the environment that we're seeing coming out of UNRWA and Gaza, is that descriptive of UNRWA, or is that descriptive of the fact that the local government that they're working with is Hamas?
No, but UNRWA is not only active in Gaza. UNRWA is active across the Arab world.
Just in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, and the Palestinian territories.
Yeah, it's not only in Gaza. And the most absurd thing is, if you happen to be a two-stater for some reason, why shouldn't the Palestinian so-called refugees within the Gaza Strip be considered refugees within territory designated for their homeland? You might make a case somehow or other that Palestinians living in other countries maybe refugees, even though that's a difficult case to make. But Palestinians living within the Palestinian-administered territory, why are they refugees?
All right. Well, I'd like to move on. Leave you at a good point. I'd like to move on actually to my next question is that about the power cuts. Israel is now agreeing with Palestinian Authority President to cut the power to Gaza, to Hamas-controlled Gaza, where right now they're already only getting about 6 hours of power per day. Why? This is seemingly at the expense of the average Gazan citizen. So what is Israel hoping to gain from this?
I think Israel is trying to get a kind of pressure on the Hamas to get into a position in which we will have the power to dictate what's happening there. I think it's a mistake. I think it's, I'm not the only one. I mean, most of the Israeli position, who decide about the position towards Gaza, say that this is a disaster for us, not for them.
How would you go about it differently?
And the disaster is, what I call disaster is a war. We are going to have a war again.
You think that think that this will result in a war?
Definitely. This is a very good reason for them to start a new war. So we will have thousands of casualties on both sides if we stop the electricity. I mean, they are not going to fight against Abu Mazen and against the Palestinians. They're going to put us in the world as those who stopped electricity in Gaza.
Isn't there a chance that they would uprise against Hamas? Hamas, they've been living at 6 hours of electricity a day for over 10 years, practically.
They cannot do anything. The people in Gaza, most of them don't support the Hamas.
They voted them into power. They voted them into power.
I'm sure there's some buyer's remorse there.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure at all, because if you look at the public opinion polls in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, Hamas are doing pretty well in the polls as well. But it's not much of a choice with the Palestinians, and I just think that, as I said before, the recognition that we have to deal with the anomaly of UNRWA is better late than never. The same thing with the power cuts. I think that the power cut should have been initiated by Israel. I think Israel should put Palestinians on notice that we are going to start a phased withdrawal of all services, not just electricity, and offer non-belligerent Palestinians very generous relocation and rehabilitation loans in third-party countries. Because what's happening in Gaza is the ultimate indictment of the two-state approach. It's created a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, despite all the humanitarian aid, and there is no solution for Gaza other than relocating and rehabilitating the resident population elsewhere.
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to stop you there. We have to move on to our second subject. Education Minister Naftali Bennett has recently begun advancing a new university and college ethics code that he hopes will keep educators' private political views separate from the classroom where they belong. The draft document was written by Professor Asa Kasher, who also drafted the IDF Code of Conduct, and it'll be brought by Bennett before the Council for Higher Education for approval in the coming days.
היום אנחנו פועלים כדי למנוע סתימת פיות באקדמיה, למנוע מצב שסטודנט רק בגלל עמדותיו הפוליטיות עלול להיפגע. למנוע מצב שמרצה שמקבל משכורת ממשלם המיסים הישראלי יוצא בקריאה להחרים את האקדמיה הישראלית שמשלמת לו את המשכורת. הביקורת שנשמעת רק מוכיחה לי את נחיצות המהלך. אנחנו בעד חופש אקדמי מלא, נגד קידום אג'נדות פוליטיות במסגרת האקדמיה, ולכן אנחנו נתקדם במהלך.
Speaking against the motion, President Rivlin says we will not be able to build thriving and vital systems of scientific research and development of inspirational works of art if we do not actively foster educational systems that encourage diversity, controversy, initiative, and unpredictability. So, while some would argue that what President Rivlin says is true, others might argue that the conditions on the campus are not that, are already not this kind of pluralistic, wonderful society, and therefore the code of ethics are necessary. So, playing the devil's advocate, do you think that the code of ethics is necessary?
Well, put it this way. First of all, again, I'd like to commend Bennett on taking the bull by the horns, because the question is, there should be questions. Is there a problem, and is this the solution? Now, I think there is a problem. I think Bennett correctly identifies the stranglehold that the radical left wing has on much of the academic discourse in Israeli universities. I think he's wrong in the kind of measures that he's adopted. I think the problem is not so much views expressed in the classroom, but the fact that there are no alternative frameworks or mechanisms for countervailing and different opinions to be heard by the students and to influence that discourse. And I think the effort should be invested far more in trying to have people not express their views, but to give countervailing voices an opportunity to express their views. Because
I wanted to hear, if you have a counterpoint.
I'm teaching. I'm a professor at the university for the last 30 years, almost 40. And actually, I've never seen in any of the Israeli universities a situation in which lecturers, in their position as a lecturer, as a professor, in the classroom, is trying to convince the students in political issues of right and left. It never happened.
So then is this censorship?
It's an image. There is nothing like that in the university, in the universities in Israel. Let me continue. So what I'm saying is that this has nothing to do with ethics. When we teach social studies, or when we teach politics, or when we teach Jewish tradition, or any other subject, it has nothing to do with politics. Another story is when a professor goes out and put his position outside on a paper or in a demonstration, and then he is identifying himself as left or right. These are the positions. That's another issue. But this is not going to be blocked by this kind of decision. So anyway, as far as I understand, this is a political gesture of the Minister of Education. It won't work because most of the people in the Higher Education Council are against it. All the students, most of the students are against it. So this was a kind of political act that he got some minutes on television. It won't work.
Yeah, I must take issue with some of the things that Professor Amirov has just said, because as I say, I don't think that the real problem is what lecturers say in their classrooms. The problem is the criteria for admission to the academia and the criteria for promotion in the academia. And I would challenge, we talked about this before once, I would challenge anyone to identify a senior academic in the social sciences or humanities who, for instance, adopted a right-wing hawkish view opposing the peace process, Oslo process. There were none. None of them warned about the way it was going to develop and urged the government not to go down that route. More than that, if at the time of the Oslo agreements you wrote a brilliant paper predicting exactly what would happen, suicide bombers and death and destruction, etc., no one would publish it. But if you published a paper completely unfounded, predicting a rosy future for the Middle East and peace and prosperity, everyone would have published it. So now when you have to promote these two people, you look at the guy who's got publications got everything wrong, and the guy with no publications has got everything right. So who do you promote?
That's not the issue we are talking about.
The
issue is in the classroom.
No, but I agree with you that Bennett identified a problem, but put forward an ineffective and inappropriate measure to deal with it. The kind of problem he's trying to deal with will not be effectively dealt with by this code of ethics.
So he's censoring. So he's censoring censorship. He's answering censorship with censorship.
Well, as I say, I think I agree that it would be unreasonable to ask a radical left-wing academic to present both sides of the argument, because obviously if you presented the right-wing side, you presented ridiculing it and saying that it's pointing out all its defects. So I don't think that in the social sciences and humanities you can ask people to present the syllabus without bringing in their own personal proclivities. I don't think that's possible. But what you do need to do is open the academia, change the criteria for admission, change the criteria for advancement and promotion. Because at the moment, no one with the right-wing view can reach senior positions in social sciences and humanities because everything's blocked. And so the students are prevented from hearing alternative views put forcefully and robustly, and so forth. There's no real academic freedom. All you're hearing is the left-wing pitch, which has been proved to be totally unfounded. And as Professor Ephraim Karsh from King's University once wrote, if the same kind of mistakes had been made in the natural sciences, if engineers built bridges which collapsed, or chemists produced medicines which had deadly outcomes, they would no longer have a professional career. But here you have a mass of academics who promoted a failed policy and no repercussions. And that cannot continue.
Unfortunately, I have to cut you off there. We got to move on to our third subject. Back in May, United States President Donald Trump's administration got into treacherous waters as the president was accused of divulging classified information to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Here's how National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster responded.
A yes or no question here. Did the president share classified information with the Russians in that meeting?
And as I mentioned already, we don't say what's classified, what's not classified. What I will tell you again is that what the president shared was wholly appropriate. The story combined what was leaked with other information and then insinuated about sources and methods. So I wanted to make clear to everybody that the president in no way compromised any sources or methods in the course of this conversation.
The only problem with McMaster's statement is that it's riddled with half-truths and whole lies. According to a recently published New York Times article, the source of the hack was indeed divulged and is reported to be Israel Mossad. So, Russia is allied with Iran. We know this. What are the chances that the information that is leaked to Russia is leaked to Iran?
Well, I'm not sure that I can make a really well-informed and authoritative comment here, but let me say the following. I heard about the danger of explosives in laptops and iPads before the Russian meeting with Trump. So I should imagine that ISIS would have really realized that someone had broken through and divulged or exposed their secret. And I'm sure that they wouldn't have completely discounted the possibility that that was Israel. So, I wouldn't be flabbergasted if someone said to me, well, Trump, because of his inexperience and his penchant for bravado, let slip something that he shouldn't. I also wouldn't be completely flabbergasted if someone said this is something being blown up by the press for another anti-Trump attack. So, I think it's very difficult without having real inside information to make intelligent and educated comments about this.
Professor Amirov, do you agree? Is this all blown up out of proportion?
Yeah, usually when we are the two of us here, we don't agree on almost anything. Here we agree. The whole thing is blown to something that is very interesting maybe in the press, but has nothing of importance. And I think it's really a lot of much about nothing.
As the devil's advocate, though, because I feel it's my job to take that position.
Sure,
in this
go
case
ahead.
Is that we as civilians don't know the importance of something that is seemingly arbitrary. There are certain classifications of classified documents, that we may not understand. And for better or worse, it might not be a good reason to be classified, but whatever it is, it's classified. So it might have jeopardized missions. Could it have? Could it have jeopardized the Mossad? Could it jeopardize Israeli-U.S. relations, Israel-Russia relations? What's the after effect of this?
I'm not sure. Put it this way, first of all, it's the prerogative of the president to decide what he divulges or not divulges. So I suppose, as far as the legal aspect goes, it would probably be Trump's prerogative to say, well, I decided to divulge it. Secondly, it depends what he said. If he said it's Israel's done, this is Israel's work, that probably something that ISIS would have imagined anyway, or certainly not discounted. It's a big difference if you say, I've got this information from Israel, or whether, Israel has inserted an agent in this camp, in this particular sector of ISIS,
we don't know exactly.
No, we don't know, which is what I said at the beginning. Without the information, it's very difficult to make informed and intelligent comment on the whole thing.
Sure.
I agree with you. I think it's witch hunting that now everybody is going after Trump, and it has nothing to do and no substance in it, and it will continue like that.
All right. So then, moving forward, should Israel kind of just let this blow over? They say, okay, forget about it, whatever, continue operating normally, status quo, or do you see maybe a pullback in how much Israeli forces divulge to the United States? Thinking in the back of their minds, maybe this is going to end up in the wrong hands. Maybe I shouldn't tell them 100%.
Well, I'm sure that's the point of departure in most intelligence work, is that you always suspect that you'd rather not divulge than divulge, and it depends, what you do. If suppose this was a mistake made by Trump, and he's learned from his mistake, so we can move forward under the assumption that, he'll know better next time. And if it was something that really wasn't that bad, I suppose Israel will move forward as well. I'm sure that intelligence cooperation between the US and Israel is vital. You might think that they may be a little more reticent now, but I'm not sure. Again, this is all detailed, specific. Unless you have a real knowledge of what was said and what was said and what should have been said and what shouldn't have been said, and if what was said shouldn't have been said, it's very difficult to speculate. Yeah, it's very difficult to speculate.
I see.
I'm sorry to say, I agree with him 100%.
You're sorry. Well, yeah, I guess you can't have it every way the way I want it. So, does Israel? Okay, so you said Israel doesn't really have a choice in trusting the United States, but going forward,
and vice versa, I would say.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
So, maybe Trump might think twice. Do you think? I would like to imagine that if this was a security leak, somebody in Trump's team is going to him and saying, "Listen, we're gonna, do all the control that we can." All the crowd control, but you got to knock this off.
Well, I'm sure under the assumption that Trump's learning curve is not completely flat, and this was pointed out to him, he will probably learn from a mistake if a mistake was made.
Okay. All right, final question. Should we be scared that something so casual, can be leaked? Because,
again, it would depend on what your assumptions are. I'm not sure. We always should be. We should be vigilant and very reticent about sharing secrets. But again, some sort of intelligence cooperation is essential, especially when you're dealing with global threats. No matter how good the Mossad is, it doesn't have the resources to cover the whole of the globe. It needs cooperation. It needs other collection services, whether it's United States, whether it's India, whether it's European agencies. So even this is the worst case scenario that Trump blurted out something that he shouldn't, this cannot terminate all intelligence collaboration.
All right. Professor Amirav, any final words?
Yeah, I think that the Mossad is one of the best institutions in the world. And I think that the other way around, it gave a lot of credit to the Mossad and to the ability of Israel. And it's true, because Israel is leading today in the world in this subject.
All right. Well, those are good final words. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have left today for this edition of ILTV's Israel Weekly. Thanks again to our guests, Professor Amirav and Dr. Sherman. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. See you next week, and shalom from Israel.